remain in many cases excluded from actual policy discussions and decision-making. That issues surrounding traditional and contemporary practices of hunting seals, whales, walrus, harbor porpoise, polar bear, and other marine mammals are almost impossible to get on the agenda of the Arctic Council and its various working groups. That modeling for the complexity of social and economic life is a significant limitation for climate change science and subsequent policy options. That climate change is seldom analyzed and understood in the context of other changes and stressors that have more impact on Indigenous communities. And how do different states define marine resources and the marine environment? How do these definitions converge with or diverge from Indigenous understandings and perspectives? Increased accessibility has already made sovereignty, territorial claims, military control, pollution prevention and control measures, as well as rescue operations appear on international and national agendas. And what kinds of implications will there be for Indigenous communities wishing to harvest Arctic fisheries given the globalized and intensely competitive nature of the fishing industry? So just a few of the questions that came before our group. And here are some of the policy recommendations that we adopted. That we recommend that viable policy options begin by recognizing the needs, perspectives, perceptions, etc. of our local communities and the importance that those play within our families and households. We recommend that the discussions on policy should be informed of diversity understandings and misunderstandings of adaptation. We recommend that policy options include the recognition for the rights of Indigenous people and to integrate their economic, social, cultural aspirations as well. We also recommended setting up a couple of groups within the Arctic Council, a Climate Change Impact Assessment Working Group and an Indigenous Rights Review Working Group. So we were hoping that those particular things will come into being. Now, lest we leave everything on issues of concern only, I want to tell you that we are doing some things about these issues we're facing here in Alaska and in the Arctic as well. One of the great projects that the Alaska Native Science Commission has had the opportunity of being involved with over about the last 5 years is developing this project with WGBH, Boston Public Television, those who brought us Sesame Street. One of the things that we were really concerned with was the kind of information that was being passed on to our future generations of young people here in the Arctic. We wanted to make sure that they were hearing not only from the science perspective, but really also from the Native perspective, from Native science as well. So we've worked with WGBH now that we have online Alaska Native perspectives on Earth and climate. And we developed this really using our own stories, using our own ways of learning, teaching. So anybody in the world can go on the site and find out what's going on and how they can work with students. Comes complete with lesson plans for K through 12. So that's one of the things that we've done. Science Commission has also had the great opportunity of the last couple of years of working with the University of Alaska Fairbanks on this project called the Community Partnership for Self-Reliance and Sustainability. And I'll tell you the reason why. We've been talking about climate change here in Alaska for a long time. Literally since at least the 1960s, people in our community have been referencing changes that they saw occurring in the weather patterns and the sea ice conditions, and it's taken science a long time to catch up with the native knowledge and wisdom that comes from people who live on the land every day. So we recognize that we need to really look at our strengths within our own communities, and that's why we looked at developing a community partnership for self-reliance and sustainability. Unfortunately, there is no one out there, no agency that seems to be willing to write a $500 million check to move a village of 200 people. And that's what we're facing. You know, 85% of our communities in Alaska are coastal communities. So we have some real issues there, and we understand that there are going to be more and more communities facing relocation or other issues similar to that. So we really wanted to help our communities to start looking at ways that they could build their own self-reliance models and sustainability. So we've worked with the University of Alaska Fairbanks in particular, also actually with UAA. Steve Colt is here with ICER, and Steve has been involved in our community partner project. These are 4 of the villages that we've been working with: Iyerusalimskiy, Kayakuk, Nutak, and Nikolai. And you can see that they have a lot of interesting things that are going on there. In Iyerusalimskiy, they've actually, their greenhouse that you see up there in the upper corner, they've done with wind and solar. So they're really building a great model that many other communities can use. Also, you can see the solar panels down in the lower corner of the Kayakuk. That's their washateria. They've put solar panels also up on their traditional council building. But I will tell you that one of the main issues in every village that we've been at is the issue of the high cost of energy. We're losing so many people from the communities because they simply can't afford to pay the costs of the rising cost of energy. Some of our elders who are paying $1,000 a month just to heat their homes. It's not sustainable. So we're really trying to find models that will work. One of the concerns we have is we do see many more of our villages now going back to using wood and coal. Not really a very healthy environment for a lot of our people to look at, but that's the reality. So we're now working with many of our partners at the university, with the Alaska Energy Authority, with the Cold House Climate Research Center at UAF, to look at models and ways that our communities can help build more successfully. I'm just about at the end here. This is another project that the Science Commission has worked on for the first time ever. One of the federal agencies actually asked a Native organization to do their social science plan. So we did the science plan for the North Slope communities on NPRA. Some of the international Indigenous initiatives that we're working on: the Indigenous Peoples Global Network on Climate Change and Sustainability, came out of our Indigenous Peoples Global Summit on Climate Change that I hosted here in Alaska a couple of years ago, bringing together for the first time hundreds of Indigenous people from all across the world. We've now formed a global network for helping on climate change. We also have a very strong alliance with Many Strong Voices, a UNEP program. That's an alliance between Alaska and SIDS, the Small Island Developing States. And another thing that the Science Commission hosts is the Arctic Alliance. That if you haven't gone onto the website yet, Arctic Monitor, it is a weekly update of everything that's going on in the Arctic. So if you're really looking for information, that's a good place to get it. And my last slide here is a quote from one of our great leaders here in Alaska, Eben Hobson, the former chairman and actually the person who started the Inuit Circumpolar Council. This was 30 years ago that he said this, that we are riding the crest of a high economic wave, and I fear about where it will deposit us and how hard we will land. So I leave that with you. Thank you all very much.
So maybe we'll have a couple of questions for Ms. Cochran.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. I'm Steve Pryor, I'm a local economist here. It seems to me that the issues from the previous speakers are kind of issues that can be addressed through technical means. Your issues really can't because they're cultural. Long term, do you think that consolidation of populations might be in the mix?
Well, I can only tell you that how many of people in this room would like to move into another area? You know, nobody wants to lose their homelands, and that's the bottom line. Is that people really would prefer for communities that have been there for 8,000 years to really be able to stay in their own areas. So I know that there's talk of that. There have been a lot of studies that have looked at those possibilities. But I can tell you from the perspective of most people, they would prefer to stay in their own lands.
Thank you.
In one of your early slides, you mentioned invasive species, and I was wondering if that was due to the migration of species going further north due to the warming, or if that was invasive in the sense of coming from another continent, like Asia or something like that.
Well, we've actually seen both instances. We have seen things like sea turtles in southeastern Alaska, which really aren't indigenous to that area. But because of the warming temperatures, we're seeing other warmer temperature or warmer bodied animals that are coming up into our areas now. Somebody told me that they actually caught a king salmon up in Barrow. And that's certainly not a usual experience. So we are seeing some of those kinds of things because of our warming ocean waters here. We're seeing some of those animals moving further north. But we've also seen a lot of things that are coming in from transportation, from other ships that come in, especially from the ballast waters. And that's one of the issues that we have had with a lot of the cruise ships and other industries that are coming in. There's been some regulation now about dumping of ballast waters because that certainly is introducing a lot of new things into our ecosystems that were not there before. So we've seen it sort of from both perspectives.
Yes, Senator Murkowski for years has been trying to get OCS revenue sharing through Congress and has been unsuccessful. And without it, I mean, there's a vast distortion, the risk-reward balance that the local communities just get about nothing from OCS development and incur all the oil spill risk. I was wondering, is the Native community tried to engage Congress to try and look at this issue a little differently?
Well, I think all you have to do is to go to any hearing on the Hill these days, and you'll almost always see somebody from one of the Native communities there. Yeah, we have a very active political body here within Alaska, not only through the Alaska Federation of Natives, but really from all of the our 12 regional corporations, and people who are asked to come in and speak. There are many times that I've actually gone before congressional bodies just to talk about issues, so we're being invited more to the tables than we used to before. We also do have annual meetings now with tribal people from across the United States meeting with President Obama, and that's happened over the last several years. So we have much more of an opportunity for discussion. I'm not saying that we've reached any of the consensus that we really want or gotten any of the funds that we really need. But at least we're seeing more of an open door attitude for us to be at the table.
Good morning, Patricia. Just to follow up on Roger's question, is it really going to help the indigenous local people if we have revenue sharing that just goes to the state of Alaska?
I think you already answered that question, Steve.
Well, I'm interested in your review.
Yeah, certainly we know that's something that we're all concerned with, and you know, a lot of our communities are formed in different ways. That some of them are federally recognized tribes, some have municipal governments, some do not, some have both. So it's really a conglomeration, and with each village it's different. So some places actually share in some of the revenue sharing from the state, and others do not. We certainly hope that we'll have some impact on things like redistricting for, you know, making sure that our indigenous communities have a representation at the state government level. And we've had good and strong allies within both state and local politics, and somewhere that have not been very helpful.
Okay, want to clap for maybe we can have an open discussion. Any questions panelists can ask each other, or any other questions for the general panel?
I had another question about the terminal in northern Russia. In terms of loading the ship, how long did it take to load the ship, and is that a particular design problem in terms of keeping the water ice-free around the tanker, you know, so it doesn't get locked and frozen while it's loading?
I think I got your question, and in fact, what it is the most difficult part of the entire system, the most difficult part of the operations. Not because it wasn't well thought of, but because the dynamic of the ice creates the problem of changing direction for the tanker at the loading tower. The loading rate is almost 10,000 cubic meter per hour. So in theory, we can load with the ramp up and ramp down, we can load within 10, 12 hours. In reality, it happens between 14, 16, and 20 hours because there is some paperwork needs to be done. There are some people transferred from the nearby tug on board. This is a loading master, the loading pilot. They need to be transferred back and forth between the tanker and the icebreaker that is on duty there. So there is some time. But roughly I would say within 20 hours we come and go. Except for the real tough period of time that normally happens somewhere in the end of March, maybe end of April, nobody can predict it, when the tanker has to disconnect from the loading tower to provide the safety of operation, because the drift is changing too fast and the captain cannot keep up with that. But the idea is that the tanker is hiding behind the terminal. So basically the terminal is playing the role of the icebreaker for that. So the ice is drifting and creates the wake behind the tower. And the wake is about the same width as the tanker. We would like to have it wider, but it costs you money too. So the solution is just to delay a little bit loading, play it safe. If the ice is changing direction rapidly, you disconnect, back off, wait a little bit, go back, reconnect, and safely continue loading. That's as simple as that. The people are very skilled now. They learn the boat. They can reconnect in 25 minutes, I would say. So it's quite fast operations, and we're doing it all the time.
Question for Professor Brigham. Is the Arctic Marine Shipping Assessment available online, maybe at the PAME site?
It's Arctic Council. Yeah, it's under PAME. It's www.pame.is for Iceland. So PAME is Protection of the Arctic Marine Environment Working Group. It's all available. And also background material. The report itself is about 180 pages, recommendations, full color, kind of fancy document. There are some 2,000 pages of background material also, from the full scenarios to research agendas. That was not, all that material is not negotiated by the 8 Arctic states. However, the report itself is. So that's all out there and fairly transparent.
This is for Alec. On the tanker that you had shown, I know in Valdez in years past there's been difficulty with a lot of benzene off-gassing while they're loading and unloading. Does the tanker itself have any kind of mitigation system to capture benzene?
Yes, it does have the system on board. The biggest, to my recollection, the biggest issue was what we call the volatile component, that there is a system that traps this all. Those vessels, because they are not very deep in hull, it's not like Aframax or VLCC tankers, so the oil drops basically from the pipeline to the tank. But the better way of doing that, it was not required for this size of the vessel and for this type of crude oil. It depends on the crude oil as well. You can run the pipeline all the way down to the bottom and make it relatively not volatile. But on this ship we have the traps and we have special devices to, so we don't have much on the deck to see that, soothing stuff. No, they're pretty clean.
Good. And the second question is, in the situation a couple of winters ago in Nome, where they had to offload a couple of miles, I think using a Russian ice cutter, they used UAF used UAV vehicles. so that in real time they could determine the danger with the ice and such and shifting. And I'm wondering if on a tanker like this, if there's been consideration of using quadcopters or any kind of UAV vehicles that they can control to do scouting and kind of use as reconnaissance.
Definitely, that is possible, and in many oil companies, and that technology is considered today. Simply, there was no real demand for that yet. But if there will be demand, there are some regulations issue there. For example, unmanned aerial crafts. Well, they can go. For now 24 hours, go ahead and do the ice reconnaissance. That's certainly possible, but you have in the Arctic in the winter, you have darkness, you have fog, so it's not always that simple. Satellite technology in many cases is better, and that's improving at breathtaking pace, I would say. So I think in 10 years from now, on your iPhone, you will be able to download the high-quality ice charts driving down the Alaskan coast or whatever. So I know it's coming.
Bob Brooks from RBAC in Los Angeles. Ms. Cochran, a couple of questions. First of all, in your tradition, do you have like an oral tradition or whatever that goes back as far as the medieval warming period, I think, 800 years ago, something like this, where there was perhaps a similar warming experience? Is there any tradition or sort of remembrance of that within the culture that your people could draw from or even talk about to the rest of the world?
Yes, certainly there is.
The red.
Okay.
Yeah, red, yeah.
You're on? Okay. Yes, there definitely is. We have oral traditions that are passed down from generation to generation, and we look at a lot of things when we're talking about it. It's not just the stories that come, but also the artifacts. A lot of the types of materials that were used during times of famine or during times of warming or cooling. We can look at the type of clothing. We can look at the stories that come along with that, some of the tools that were used during those times, the games that were played. So really all of those things are part of our traditional history. And we have looked at a lot of the things, especially right now we're doing some major bodies of knowledge that are coming from people looking at sources of food that have been used in traditional hard times, not only here in Alaska, but really from indigenous communities all over the world. There are crops that grow better during times of cold season or times when there's less water or rain available. So we have a lot of that history, and that's part of what is being documented now in a number of our communities. So yeah, those oral traditions certainly exist.
Is there anything specific about this recent warming period? I say recent, relatively, right? 800 years ago or so, that could be applicable in today's world?
Well, I think mostly it has to do with the understanding the adaptation of our communities. People who've been around for centuries, a period of time, obviously have been there for a good reason. I'll tell you that from our perspective, that the reason for the long-term survivability in the harshest of environments, in the cruelest of worlds that we have lived in, is because of the value system and the way that our communities are raised. That really is an important and integral part of our ability to adapt and survive. And that really has to do with the coping skills, with how we interact, not just with our environment around us, but really within our own communities. That our first responsibility is to our people, to our tribes, to our communities. So it's really building those kind of models that look at long-term survivability. For us, that's what has sustained us, and it's not really the influence so much of what is happening around us. We just have had to learn to survive in many kinds of conditions.
Okay, we'll stop there, and if there's any other questions, please come up and feel free to talk to the panelists, but let's give them a round of applause.